Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Sheridan Dulas & Kins, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm, has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009, Sheridan Dulas & Kins are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
And welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Alan Miller with you today, unscripted, with a surprise guest and a surprise interview, and I'm really, really happy to welcome former Governor Tim Pawlenty. And Tim, welcome back.
Oh, it's good to be back, Alan. Thank you.
Tim came in to do a promo for our 25th anniversary, and Steve Francisco grabbed a hold of him and said, "You can't leave until we do an interview," and here we are. Now, I have one point to bring up with you in this unscripted interview, and that I am really annoyed at you because 25 years ago, you were the first guest that we had on Access Democracy, and you were a vibrant young man, and I was a middle-aged man. Today, you're still a vibrant young man, and I'm a geriatric. So something went wrong here along the way, and it's wonderful to see you. Tim was a two-term governor, should have been a candidate for vice president with John McCain. Didn't work out for McCain, didn't work out for Tim, but it should have. And politics, which we can talk about, are so different today than it was. We always got along. We always were able to talk, even though philosophically we were not on the same page. But today, that partisanship has gone awry. Where are we politically today?
Well, I'll take a shot at answering that, but let me first say separately, Alan, I want to congratulate you and Access to Democracy and your team over a long period of time for your anniversary, 25th anniversary of this program. I know there's going to be separate acknowledgement of that, but congratulations to you, and thank you for the public service that you and this program have provided, bringing people together to hear from policy leaders, to engage in debate and discussion. And it really has role modeled what you just described, which is we may not have the same political philosophies on everything, but if you treat each other with some degree of respect, that you can have a discussion and you can learn from each other and you can ultimately respect each other in the process. So thank you for that. 25 years is incredible.
Thank you. And of course, it's an all-volunteer effort. So as we look back, we talk about probably over 10,000 hours of volunteer work has gone into this program. We have about 3,000 interviews. We've done debates, political debates. We've done a lot of twins work, and they've been a sponsor for the last several years. It's been a great experience for me, for us, and of course I've stepped back now on this show. Steve and Sharon Miller have taken over the reins as the producers. I am sort of the resident geriatric, and
this host emeritus.
I don't host emeritus.
But on your question of partisanship, I think where we are at, nothing stays the same. So if you study political science and political history like you and I both have, you realize that things continue to evolve. And I think politics, rightly or wrongly, is a lagging indicator of cultural change that has already taken place. So if you look at the legislature or Congress to see how they operate, they mostly don't look forward strategically, cast a vision, and act preemptively. They usually are reacting to something that's already happened, some crisis, some problem. They convene hearings, they call witnesses forward, they pass some legislation to make sure something bad that just happened doesn't happen again in the future. It's an oversimplification, but it's substantially true. In our country, what we're seeing now in what I'd call the Trump-dominated Republican Party, and increasingly the squad, for lack of a better term, dominated Democrat Party, is reflections not just of the country's cultural and philosophical change, but really the change that has occurred of the people who show up at the grassroots level. So what your viewers may not know is we in Minnesota, as an example, have a caucus system. Not many people attend, very few people attend, few people vote in a primary. And when you are a candidate for office, you're trying to reflect a certain constituency, but one of that constituencies are those grassroots activists who show up at caucuses and show up and vote in primaries. If you lose them, you probably are going to lose your seat because a lot of these seats aren't politically competitive in a general election. So the party nomination or party blessing in some form is critical to your reelection. So these candidates are increasingly gravitating towards the perspective of those party bases, and that leads to increased partisanship. And in states like Minnesota, it is difficult to change that because of the caucus system. I think we should open up the process, get more people to participate earlier in the process, try to broaden the requirements that these candidates have to have appeal to a broader constituency than just a small sliver of their party base in the early days of this process. I think we'd be better.
From your words to God's ears, really, because we are in a terrible, terrible situation politically now. We're facing probably the most important election in our lifetime in 2024. We have two candidates, one who I believe is unfit for any office, the other who has contributed a great deal to this country but is past his prime. And unfortunately, as you know from political campaigns, you always think that you're going to win the closer you get to the election. And he feels that way, and he won't step back either. But, I look back, the first interview that we had 25 years ago, and I stepped in, somebody was supposed to interview you on the station. We were Burnsville-Egan Community Television at that time. Somebody was supposed to interview you and pulled out a day or so before. And I was asked because I had done some television back in New York before we moved 26 years ago to Minnesota.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
Smartest thing we ever did. And I stepped in and we conducted that interview. I asked Sharon, my wife, afterwards, how did I do? She said, you had all the personality of a shirt cardboard. And being very competitive, I thought, I want to do this again. Well, not only did we do it again with you on several occasions, but you were good enough to come in, and you went from legislator to majority leader to governor for 2 terms to Washington. You should have had a greater political career. I really regret that you didn't. Because I think back when we lived on Long Island, I was a Democratic leader. The Republican leader was a fellow by the name of Angelo Roncallo, who went on to become a Supreme Court justice, a judge, on Long Island. And when my sons were bar mitzvahed, he was there. You know, that's the type of relationship we had. If I needed something, I could call him. If he needed something, he could call me. That's non-existent today, and I grieve for that. I grieve for the fact that, for instance, we didn't have to worry about our cell phones 25 years ago. And I think that social media and cell phones are one of the things that really have damaged us tremendously. The loss of newspapers during this last 25 years. Well, what's your feeling on that?
Well, I think you've put your finger on one of the things that fuels this hyperpartisanship, which is so many of us migrate to news or information sources that only affirm what we already believe. So it started with cable news and conservative or liberal radio, and now, of course, it's in social media. But the psychologists who've studied this will say people tend to gravitate to news stories, presenters, information flows that makes them make them feel affirmed about what they already believe. And so they're less likely to go to a source that might challenge their thinking, might expose them to new thinking, might expose them to different thinking. And so each of us, if we want to be civically responsible, I think has an opportunity, maybe even a responsibility to say, I'm not just going to listen to that right or left radio station. I'm not just going to listen to that right or left blog or particular presentation. I'm going to go out and expose myself to the other side's arguments. And maybe you'll still disagree, but at least you'll understand another perspective.
And so few people do that.
Yes,
today.
and if it's respectfully presented and received, it's helpful. We're never going to all agree in a democracy. That's the nature of a democracy. It's always loud. It's always boisterous. It's always going to have clashes. You can go back to the founding period. They had duels. People called Abraham Lincoln terrible names, at least in the lexicon of the times.
Right.
So it's a continuation of sort of politics being pretty rough and tumble to begin with. But now you have what you just described, which is people not even wanting to be in relationship or in discussion with the other side because they believe them as not just wrong, but evil.
And unfortunately, that permeates so much of maybe what's become the majority of thinking. The Republican Party, your party, used to be your party anyway, has shrunk. The Democratic Party has shrunk. The independents have expanded to a large middle, and they probably will control what happens in this election. And I worry about it. I worry about it every day. I write about it.
The good news is, Alan, if you go down a list of, say, the top 5 or 7 bread and butter issues, you can still get majority support for most and what people would consider sort of a common sense approach to those issues. It falls apart, however, when you get into these subgroups that dominate politics below the radar screen. So it starts with, are people even voting in a general election? Minnesota has one of the highest rates of voter turnout in the country.
That's true.
Even in Minnesota, in a good year, it's somewhere between 60 and 70%. So that means up to a third of our fellow eligible citizens are not voting even in a general election. And then you get down to a primary. If it's an unnoteworthy or unexciting primary, you'd be lucky to get 10% turnout in a primary. And in caucuses, a fraction of a percent. And so we can still get consensus as a society, as a community together, if more people participate. But we have outsourced too much of the decision-making to small slices of the population who are fairly extreme in certain examples, certain cases. And I think we need to take back that power by having more people show up and participate.
And I hope that in this election we have the opportunity to do that, and that Project 2025 doesn't put one party in position to destroy this economy, because it's been said many times, democracy is very fragile.
You can break it.
And, we've made it for 250 years. We are absolutely the envy of the world. And that's obvious from watching NATO and listening to the NATO leaders and things like that. Or even our adversaries who really wish that they could emulate what we have in their autocracies. And it is very frightening. It's frightening for me. Now, my day is past. I'm going to be 90. Not a kid like you, but...
you ain't dead yet, Mr. Miller. You ain't dead yet. You still got some fight left in you.
I worry about the future. Yes, fight. It's a good thing we didn't have duels back in my day, because I would have never made it this far. Somebody would have definitely offed me.
Well, elections have consequences. And, as you think about the choices we have in the 2024 presidential election, how we ended up with those two candidates, there's a story behind that. But if you're a Democrat, your party, Joe Biden, regardless of what else you think of his policy positions, is pretty clearly impaired in a sort of, he's feeble and he's frail. And it didn't just reveal itself at the debate.
Well,
it was hiding. It was hiding in plain sight for at least a couple of years before that. And I think anybody with their eyes open could see it, at least see it in part. And the idea that he, his team, and ultimately the Democratic Party thought it was a good idea to run a impaired 81-year-old for 4 more years, on its face, just doesn't pass the common sense test.
And of course, he says that he won going away in the primaries, but he didn't have opponents in the primaries.
Correct.
He had who? Dean Phillips?
Yes.
From Minnesota, and that was about the extent of it. Kennedy dropped out and became an independent. Yes. And he's speaking of impaired individuals. Yeah. Certainly one of them.
But if you look at the issues, in a presidential race, it's an electoral college, as you know. So there's only, in typical years, say 5 to 10 states that are really in play. Everybody else, you can sort of pre-predict how California, New York, Hawaii, Illinois is going to vote, Oklahoma, Wyoming, and the like. So you come down to maybe 5 to 10 states. And in those states, you could just come down to a few 100,000 people who are actually the persuadable voters, because most people are going to already know how they're going to vote. Doesn't matter what's said between now and November. Most of them are going red or blue. But there's a small slice of people in 5 to 10 states that are going to decide this election. When you ask them, what do you care about? What resonates with you? The top issues include Biden's health and capabilities for 4 more years, which people are highly skeptical of. And the next 2 or 3 include border security issues and chaos at the border. Inflation, understandably, while it's coming down as a rate of increase, the overall price relative to a few years ago is still high on energy and groceries and rent and so many other things.
Out of sight in many cases.
Yes.
Corporations have jumped in there and really made a bonanza for themselves.
No question.
In terms of elevating prices.
And also, there are other issues as well. But again, vote driving issues for persuadable voters in swing states. Another one is concerns about crime, and the list goes on. But those are some of the issues. And so who can really speak to that? If you think about those as the framing issues, and you listen to Biden's views, for example, on immigration versus Trump's views, regardless of what you think of Trump, people who are upset or frustrated about border security, they're giving Trump a second look, not because they love Trump, but because they're really frustrated with what they believe to be, and understandably so, chaos at the border.
And of course, we need immigrants. We are all immigrants. This country was built on immigrants. But we can't have hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of people just wandering into the country. There has to be a procedure, a process for them to come in legally and participate in making this country as great as it has been.
Yes, and so you have, a year ago or so, 2 to 3 million estimated illegal entrants into the country. These are individuals who are not here on H-1B visas, who are necessarily automatically or quickly employed in high-paying jobs that do lots of contribution back. But some of them end up in places like New York. They have no housing, they have no health care, they don't have any transportation. Even New York, which is sort of the epicenter of liberal thinking, you have current and former public officials, including the current governor there, saying, "Don't come here. We can't handle it.
We can't handle
There's no plan.
Anymore, right?
There's
and
no
the
plan."
The mayor of New York City says the same thing.
So you cannot have that. We're a country of 360 million people, and if you have 2 or 3 million illegal new arrivals a year, undocumented new arrivals every year, and no plan, and they all gravitate towards public resources, that's a real problem.
The real sad element of all of this is the fact that most of these people are trying to come here because they're fleeing life in their countries. They are not, as Donald Trump would say, they're not all rapists and gangsters and criminals, etc. They are, for the most part, just poor individuals trying to get a better life. And
yes,
they
but
see
the
that
problem,
here, but we have to have a method to get them into this country legally.
And many are coming under the umbrella of the refugee laws in our country. And what the American people are seeing is many of the folks coming, refugee status was supposed to be granted in the past in war-torn countries, people who are experiencing, very, very challenging social disorder or war. And now you have economic migrants, people coming just for economic opportunity or in some cases initially access to public benefits. And that's not what the refugee statutes and laws were supposed to be for.
No, that's true.
And so American people look at that and go, you're kind of making a mockery, first of all, of the process and the laws regarding how you get in. And second of all, our refugee laws. And we're supposed to be a country based on the rule of law. And when you have a whole bunch of people making a mockery or ignoring the law, there's other people who go, wait a minute, that's not right. And they're onto something.
It also damages our economy because it puts on social organizations a tremendous burden.
Yes.
That they have to meet. And New York, for one, Texas sends them to New York. Yeah. Texas sends them wherever, Texas to Colorado, any place else like that. But it then burdens our social organizations, and it damages our economy.
Yeah, and I think we want to be a country that encourages legal, orderly immigration, but that's not what we have.
No, I know that my family goes back 2 generations to my grandfather coming in, and on my mother's side, also her family coming in from Europe and Russia. Yours as well.
Yes.
From probably
and done correctly and done wisely, done smartly, done strategically, done compassionately, allowing a reasonable number of people in who have been vetted, identified, screened, and also, helping to meet the strategic needs of our economy. It can be helpful. But again, we're well beyond that, and what we have now is pretty out of control.
One thing you said about people really being available or making themselves available to listen to both sides. I mean, I am one who listens to MSNBC in terms of cable, but I also listen to Fox because I want to see what both viewpoints are. And you hit it on the head when you said people turn off the other side. We don't have that really ability anymore, and we have the ability, I shouldn't say that, we don't have the desire to know what anybody else is thinking or saying. We want to know only our viewpoint and how we can proceed on our viewpoint, and it's gotten very dangerous.
And intensifying, and for this reason, it used to be cable TV and radio, but candidly, most people under, say, 50, 40 don't even watch live TV anymore or cable TV. So they are migrated to social media platforms. And if you're a teen, a 20-something, a 30-something, you may be getting most of your information on social media, and you may not even be selecting what platform you're going to. Stuff gets pushed to you pursuant to an algorithm.
Nor do you know if it's true.
Or if it's true. And so now you have
another big thing.
TikTok as an example. People getting all sorts of information socially and politically, economically, and otherwise from TikTok. And the algorithm feeds it to them. And that's sort of a whole nother layer of who's behind the algorithm. In the case of TikTok, it's owned by a Chinese entity, maybe under the influence of the Chinese government. They may have agendas beyond just entertainment and making money. They may have political agendas. And I'm not sure the users, the end users of that content, even realize what's happening in many cases.
And our spectrum of paying attention to things has also shrunk.
No question.
10 seconds, 15 seconds. But you don't know in that 10 or 15 seconds if it's truthful. I have had friends give me all sorts of statements, pro and con, that I know absolutely came from an algorithm that didn't come from anything factual. And it's a real danger.
Well, a light bulb went on for me some years ago when I was governor. I was talking to one of the local reporters from then, one of the prominent news, in this case, a newspaper. And I said, I noticed your coverage used to be sort of neutral or balanced, but it really seems to have become more and more what I called snarky back then. And this person said to me, with internet becoming an increasing part of our viewership, we can see very clearly when people come on the landing page, what article do they go to, how long do they stay, does their cursor or eyeballs scroll down to the bottom of the column and actually read the article, or do they just skim it and go? And this person said, we're accountable for clicks, for eyes coming to the stuff we write. And she said, was a she in this case, if I write something neutral about, say, healthcare reform, on the one hand, somebody said this, on the other hand, somebody said that, and it's sort of a factual policy summary, she said, nobody reads it. If I write something scandalous, controversial, snarky, it's got some wild headline attached to it, guess what? The readership goes through the roof.
Yeah.
So that was an early indication. I'm like, aha, of all of what you're seeing now, which is described as clickbait, which is how much of what's getting pushed to you or where you go is a function of you genuinely wanting to learn about policy and data and information, or you kind of want to be entertained?
Well, it's really a pleasure to be able to talk to you like this once again. And I really grieve the fact that you got out of politics because it's your type of politics and your really ethical beliefs that we really need on both sides of the aisle now. I certainly regret the fact that Biden has been insulated by a group of really self-centered people who have kept the truth about him from coming out. Now, we don't have to worry about that with Trump because they just wind him up and put him out there and he can spew lies for an hour and a half. But it leaves us with two very, very difficult choices.
Well, and I also think, I know you got to go, but when you look at these candidates, it says a lot about the parties and maybe them, but it also says something about us meaning the American public, the American voter, because those parties and those candidates think they're mirroring what people want.
And unfortunately, they are not. Unfortunately, people have moved to the middle, and hopefully they won't be swayed. Hopefully, we will survive this election. I still hope for a new candidate on the Democratic side, and perhaps that's possible. If not, we will have to hold our noses and vote. But I can't thank you enough for coming back. And
my pleasure. Alan, thank you for all that you've done for this program, Access to Democracy. And again, we're on different sides of the political fence often, but you are a gentleman and you kind of model the kind of tone and I think discussion that can make us all better.
See, if you say that, then I know I've fooled even you.
Yeah.
Governor Tim Pawlenty, really a pleasure, an Eagan resident, and the type of individual that we really needed in politics and we need back in politics again.
You're very kind.
And really, thanks again so much for coming in.
Good to be with you.
So.